Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
And I'm Brain Beth Jason.
Jason, thanks for joining. Megan is at a judges conference this week, so we're in the studio unsupervised, solo.
Goddamn pig.
You're squeaking the pigs.
Trying.
I'm shaking
It never works.
all of our bones. We've got the good juju going, and shout out to Megan, this is her favorite judges conference, and she's hanging out with some of our Patreons too.
And I got a cryptic message from our Patreon that our one fave and who's with her.
Our
And I'm
Louisianian?
not sure what's going on. Like,
Oh.
I'm like, you're gonna have to explain this later. She's like, no, because it might make the show. I'm like, ooh.
I haven't checked
No, she
Facebook,
sent-
so
she-
it was just to you.
Yeah.
Oh, way to leave me out.
And it was like that's why it was late last night, and I'm like, ooh, like this is concerning.
Well, they're off having fun at night, and by day, Judge Megan is learning new judgy things.
She's learning to be more judgy.
More judgy.
Great. That's what I need.
That's exactly what we need. Oh gosh. Okay. So since we get to be solo today, I picked a case that is right in our wheelhouse, my friend.
Kidoki.
This is a case of a 17-month-old child who was found unresponsive in his child care center. This is a complicated investigation, and I know you're going to have some insights on it. And let me tell you a little bit about everything. Not a little bit. I'm going to tell you everything.
Tell me all of it.
I will tell you all of it. But we're going to start with Amy and Andrew Kingan, Kingan. Google Translate pronounced it several different ways, but
Kingan?
Yeah, Kingan. I don't know why K's and G's are hard for me, and literally they were multiple times in my last name, my maiden name. So it shouldn't be hard for me.
Right, figure it out.
Yep. Kingan. Andrew went by Andy. They had built a loving home for their family in Lincolnshire, Illinois. The couple had two sons, Daniel Mock and Jacob Kingan, until August 31st, 2007, when they welcomed twins, Emily and Benjamin, also known as Ben, into their lives. They're a hardworking American family, and when the twins were 9 weeks old, they enrolled them in the Mini Subi Daycare Center in their hometown of Lincolnshire, trusting it as a safe place for their little ones to grow and thrive.
Where is Lincolnshire?
In Illinois.
Okay.
Yep. On January 13th, 2009, Amy chose to keep 17-month-old Benjamin home from childcare as he'd been coughing and vomiting in the days before. However, by the next day, he seemed fine, so she decided to send him back to childcare on January 14th. Did you just hit your face?
Yeah, I turned my head to cough and headbutt the microphone, so it didn't work.
You good
Sorry.
now, friend?
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, I hate it when my face gets in the way of everything.
It was my headphone.
Oh. Anyway, January 13th, he was vomiting kind of the days before, so she kept him home. But January 14th, 2007, she sent him back to daycare. At around 4 p.m. that day, she received a call informing her that Ben had been taken to the hospital. She and Andy, her husband, rushed there, only to be met with the news that their toddler had passed away from a head injury. Yeah. So Amy explained that Benjamin had a habit of throwing himself backwards to express frustration, which is a normal developmental I'm so sorry. My brain just stopped working, but
Behavior.
That is the
There you
word.
go.
Thank you.
It's early today.
It is on a Sunday.
It is a morning show.
It is. Woo. And we know that Charnell is not a morning person, but I'm trying my best over here. Anyway, yes. So as toddlers do sometimes, when he was frustrated, he would throw himself back. Okay. And this is something that Amy checked with the pediatricians to make sure that this was typical behavior. They assured them that this is nothing concerning. And also, Amy and Andy clarified that any minor health issues that Ben had been experiencing before were unrelated to his death. Okay? So what exactly happened that day at Mini Subi Daycare Center? Ben attended the center with his twin sister and his 2 older siblings as well. Now, in Michigan, children are required to be broken up in different classrooms by ages, and I know that this is very similar to other states. So I'm going to make a safe conclusion here that his twin sister would have likely been enrolled in the same room for his care, but the older siblings would not have been. There are times when centers can combine age groups towards the end of the day as children are picked up and classroom sizes get smaller and smaller. And this did all happen about 3:30 p.m. So it's possible that his other siblings might have been in the room, but we're not sure. The day was described as a typical day for the daycare center. And I will switch back and forth between calling it daycare and childcare because in Michigan, we aren't allowed to call it daycare anymore. We call it childcare. That was done several years ago in a law change just to assure that the profession was taken more seriously and was seen as an actual professional career and not just babysitting. Right. So just so you guys know, when I say childcare and daycare, I'm talking about the same center here that he was at. So this Mini Subi Daycare Center, that day, Ben was with a 22-year-old assistant caregiver named Melissa Calusinski. And I don't want to mess up that last name, so I'm just going to call her Melissa from now on.
Sure.
Calusinski. So Melissa was working in Ben's room that day. Melissa is the youngest of Paul and Cheryl. They had 5 children, and she grew up in a loving and supportive household located in a neighborhood just outside of Chicago. Her loved ones described her as a compassionate individual who went out of her way to help others. Although she reportedly never got into any trouble while growing up, her sister Crystal claimed that she had a tough time at school as her peers used to tease her on a regular basis. As she grew into an adult, she knew what she wanted to do, take care of children. At the age of 22, she finally got a chance to work as a teacher's assistant at the Mini Subi Daycare Center in Lincolnshire with her sister Crystal, also worked there. She had no prior history of violence or any trouble at all, which is why she was qualified to work in the childcare center to begin with. She could pass a background check. Melissa claims that when she came to work, Ben was happy, playful, and acting his normal 17-month-old self. Late that afternoon, after the kids were fed a snack and cleaned up, Melissa says that she put Ben down on the carpet and he crawled into his bouncy seat on the floor. In a 2014 interview that Melissa did with 48 Hours, she said this: he was sitting in his bouncy chair, playing with his blanket, and he was starting to kind of fall asleep, which was normal. The teacher that was working with Melissa, so this would be like the lead teacher of the classroom, stepped out of the room briefly, leaving Melissa alone with the children. That's when Melissa says she noticed something was wrong with Ben. She said he didn't look right. She said, I looked at his little hand and I touched his hand and said, Ben, Ben. He didn't wake up at all, and I saw orange foam coming out of his nose. Around 3:30 p.m. was when she found him unresponsive. She immediately called for help. Her sister Crystal rushed into the room and tried resuscitating Ben through CPR. He was rushed to the hospital and tragically at the hospital declared dead within an hour. So, of course, an investigation is launched. And I want to point out that this would not just be an investigation by law enforcement. This investigation would have been launched for childcare licensing, as this was a licensed childcare center, as well as Child Protective Services. But those 2 investigations have to be done in collaboration with law enforcement, and they have to stay out of the way of law enforcement and let them conduct their investigation first. Now, according to the police report during an autopsy, I say that just so you guys, if you ever hear about something like this happening in your own community and you wonder, why is this daycare center still open, or what is going on? You have to understand that there is steps, and law enforcement has to
multiple levels of
investigations that go on, and everyone has their own statute that they have to follow and steps that they have to follow. So like in Michigan, when something like this happens, childcare licensing would immediately submit what's called a summary suspension, where we would temporarily suspend the license so that no care could be provided to any children until the result of the investigation. And I'll get into that a little more later, but I don't know that happened in this particular case, because this is Illinois, and so their statute might be a little bit different of how they operate. But according to the police report, during an autopsy, the pathologist, Dr. Choi, told a detective that he observed a skull fracture, extensive bleeding inside Ben's head, and that the injury was caused by another person using strong force within hours prior to Ben's death. And yet, Ben had no cuts or obvious wounds on the outside of his body, no serious bruises. The pathologist listed the autopsy as pending further studies. So police brought in, of course, all of the childcare workers who had been with Ben on the day of his death, and they were very determined to find out what happened. This was a video recorded interrogation. Okay, it was an interrogation. I will call it that. It lasted a very long time. There are definitely snippets of it available on the internet should you want to look this up yourself. But Detective Sean Curran, during the interrogation, said, "I have a good idea that you've seen what happened, or you were involved with what happened, because you were the only one in the room at the onset of this." Melissa denied over and over again, more than 60 times, doing anything to Ben. Melissa said, "I never put my hands on him." She's crying during the interrogation. She said, "I did not drop him." But the interview/interrogation continues. There's also a detective, George Falenko, in there. He says, "You're there. It's not like there were 50 people in the room with you. It was you." Melissa feels that they weren't listening to anything that she said. After 9 hours under interrogation and without an attorney, Melissa changes her story. She says that she thought if she told the investigators what they wanted to hear, they would let her go home. They didn't make any promises of letting her go home, but they were saying things like, "We're not going anywhere until we get the facts here." And Melissa felt the only way for them to let her go was if she just made a confession. You should also know at this point in time, Melissa does have a lower IQ. She was tested and was found to have she's high functioning, but she does have a lower IQ. So when you put yourself in that position of over 9 hours, in total it ends up being about 10 hours that she is held and questioned without an attorney present. And the detectives are saying things, and the detectives aren't saying things that were out of line, okay? They were giving her scenarios. They're like, so he starts to act up. You get mad at him. You throw him on the floor. At this point in time, after 9 hours, she starts nodding to these suggestions. And so then Detective Flenko says, "So you threw him on the floor?" Melissa says, "Yeah, really hard." When Melissa was taken to another station for booking, she repeated the same story to another investigator. She actually used a doll, where she described that she got frustrated with Ben after washing his hands after snack, which in Michigan is a rule. They do have to wash their hands before and after snacks. And she got frustrated with the way he was behaving, and she demonstrated with a doll how she threw him down on the floor after that. After spending many, many hours with the police, she was arrested. So The interrogation lasted about 10 hours, but then she was taken to another station and booked. So in total, she is there for about 14 hours. And at that point in time, she was arrested for the murder of Benjamin, even though she almost immediately takes her story back that she told the police. And in the police car, kept saying, no, I'm innocent. But she had told the investigators that she did what she did, and after that, the manner of death on Ben's death certificate was listed as homicide. And law enforcement announces that they solved the case. So she admits to police that she had taken him and thrown him to the ground. And in November 2011, nearly 3 years after the death of Ben, Melissa went on trial for murder. The state argued that Ben was a perfectly healthy toddler leading up to his death. Matthew DiMartini and Stephen Scheller prosecuted the case. Dr. Choi, the pathologist who conducted the autopsy, testified about the skull fracture that he had seen and how he believed the child's injury was recent and consistent with having been thrown to the floor by someone. But Melissa's trial attorney, Paul DeLuca, told the jury about a head injury that Ben had previously received, and it was noticed at the child care 3 months earlier. Melissa was not even working at the daycare center 3 months earlier. But after Ben's death, multiple people, including another daycare teacher, Nancy Callinger, told investigators about this injury. So Nancy Callinger, during police questioning, said he got a bump on the back of his head. They called mom. Mom called the doctors, okay? And what we would call in the state of Michigan, Jay, is the incident report. Mm-hmm. So an incident report was filled out. He's got a bump on the back of his head. And, mom calls the doctor. Doctor's like, it's not significant. It's fine because of the way he threw himself back. No one threw him at that time 3 months earlier. This was a result of him throwing himself back, okay? So we have this information and it's brought into the trial, but prosecutor Scheller argued that the earlier injury was insignificant. The pediatrician actually examined Benjamin's head, felt around, and said that there were no issues and mom should just keep an eye on him, and Ben never had an issue after that. But that's not what the defense is saying during this trial. They noted that after the injury, there were possible signs of head trauma. Medical records showed that in the days after the injury, Ben was lethargic and had a persistent fever. And another child care employee, Holly, who we will not, she's only going to be identified by her first name. She testified for the defense about the last time that she saw Ben 2 days before his death. Holly said that Melissa walked into the room and she was holding Ben, and she said that he's not feeling well. It was almost immediately after that Ben threw up everywhere. And the next day, 1 day before he died, Ben was kept home from childcare. So prosecutor Matthew DiMartini argued that it was a stomach bug or a winter cold, not related to any sort of head trauma. He was given Pedialyte, put to bed. He woke up the next day and he was fine. But the defense maintained that Ben's prior injury was so serious that any new impact could have had major consequences, and Ben did have a habit of throwing his head back. So Holly, the other daycare teacher, caregiver, whichever you would like to call her, said there were many times he'd be sitting on the ground and he would just lunge his body backwards and hit his head. And she said it was like he was like a headbanger. Like he just, this was very frequent. And so Nancy Callinger recalled that Ben had done that twice on the day of his death, even. She was she was the teacher that was in the room with Melissa until she left to do, I don't know if she took a break. I don't know if she had to go fill in for ratios into another room. We're not sure, but she left the room and left Melissa alone. So Nancy told the police, I put him on the floor. He immediately threw himself onto the floor. And then I walked towards the sink and he threw himself again. So the prosecution in this trial, prosecution is insisting that Melissa had hurt Ben, and they point to her confession. Whereas the defense is like, listen, 3 months prior, he had had a significant enough head injury from throwing himself back that he had a bump on his head. No scans were done at that time. A pediatrician just felt around and was like, oh, you should watch him for signs. And after that, he then continued to throw himself back, okay? Essentially, possibly re-injuring himself over and over, all right? That's what the defense is trying to point out here. But the prosecution, it has Melissa's confession where she says, I threw him on the floor, right? So Stephen Schuller, one of the prosecutors, tells the jury, she became frustrated holding Ben. She threw him to the floor. They told the jury that the fall was so severe that it caused a skull fracture. At trial, they mentioned a skull fracture more than 30 times. But there's question of whether or not there really was one. While most of the experts who testified from both sides agreed that there appeared to be a fracture in autopsy photo, one defense expert said that she couldn't say for sure. And according to Melissa's attorney, Paul DeLuca, the x-rays that the prosecution had provided before the trial were unreadable. The state's final witness was pathologist Dr. Manny Montez, and he gave the most vivid and damaging testimony at trial. He said that he examined the body and felt the fracture with his bare hands. It was that significant. He said that he put his finger in the skull through the fracture, which of course is devastating for a jury to hear. That's a significant skull fracture. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before convicting Melissa of aggravated battery of a child and first-degree murder. So she is sent to prison. Excuse me. In 2012, a year after the conviction, Dr. Thomas Rudd, a then newly elected Lake County coroner, agreed to review the autopsy evidence at the urging of Melissa's attorneys. So, Dr. Rudd looks at these and sees a membrane. And what he means by membrane is that he sees a scab, and it's similar to what forms on your skin, except it's in the brain. Okay? So it's essentially showing there was an old injury that scabbed over in the brain. Now, at Melissa's trial, Dr. Choi had told the jury that he observed no sign of an old injury. But according to Dr. Rudd, the new county coroner, Dr. Choi had simply missed it. So he calls in Dr. Nancy Jones, a well-regarded pathologist, for a second opinion. And she agreed with Dr. Rudd and noted that the old injury had been healing for about 2 or 3 months, a time frame consistent with that bump on Ben's head that was noticed and documented at the daycare. So Dr. Rudd is like, I don't know how they let that go. It's kind of beyond me. Like the defense experts at the trial, Dr. Jones and Dr. Rudd believed that the old injury was further exacerbated by Ben's head banging. So the added fluid of the recent injury pushes that brain down and shuts down the breathing system, and this is the cause of the child's death. It was the old injury. The old injury was massive. So Dr. Rudd phoned the now retired Dr. Choi, who signed a sworn affidavit, conceding that he had, quote, missed that Ben had suffered an old injury, end quote. But he crossed out the word significant, and when asked if he would change his testimony at trial, Dr. Choi said no. So, Matthew DiMartini, okay, he says there's no indication that anything in there is significant. All right, he was one of the prosecutors, right? So he's like, well, there's no indication here that it's significant because Dr. Choi crossed out the word significant. He wasn't willing to say that this old injury is significant, but Dr. Rudd and Dr. Jones are saying this old injury was significant. So the prosecutors are like, it's not significant. And now we've got a he said, she said, a back and forth by the experts here. Dr. Rudd says what should have been done was that whole section should have been cut out to look under the microscope to see if, in fact, it is a skull fracture, and they didn't. So Dr. Rudd believed that Dr. Choi and the other medical experts thought what they thought was a skull fracture may have instead been a normal part of Ben's growing skull, but he couldn't prove it. Then, in 2015, Melissa's father said that he received an anonymous call that there was a set of x-rays at the coroner's office that had never been turned over to the defense. When Dr. Rudd's staff searched the computer archives, they came across startling images that were never shown at trial.
So, for those that don't know how things work,
Yes.
the medical examiner / coroner, tomato, their word is pretty much the end all be all of investigation.
Yes, it is.
Even for law enforcement. So what they say is goes. Now, that being said, they said that what was the little boy's name?
Ben.
Ben suffered this head injury, and they determined the cause of death and potential time frame. It's a forensic science, but there are mistakes that can be made.
Yep.
Obviously.
After the confession, they ruled it as homicide in the coroner's report. When at first it said further review needed.
Correct, because that's the easy way out. Because you got a confession, so anything else is just there's no need to go
Extra
through the
work.
effort. It's extra work. Now, these medical examiners are typically there's only usually one of them per county.
Yes.
If not, or some that cover several counties, like in our state. So if you think that this medical examiner / coroner doesn't have a massive ego, you are sadly mistaken. So for them to admit a mistake doesn't happen.
Right.
And for them to be like, oh, I overlooked that, or oh, I didn't do that. It's not. It's that you're pulling at strings. So we've got all that.
We do.
We have all that with Dr. Choi, who again, he gets a phone call and be like, this woman confessed. He's like, all right, well, I'm just going to wrap this up.
Right. Move on to my next case.
Right. So again, and then this confession, and I'm doing air quotes for everybody.
Yes.
This confession.
This interrogation.
Interrogation, which is what they do. And it's not against the law. Abnormal practice. It's not against the law. It's standard.
It is.
They have a report from the doctor saying it happened at this time of day, or it happened within this time frame.
Yes.
Who was around him? This person, this poor Melissa. Yep. She was the only one there. And again, if you badger someone for 14 hours and you ask them if they set the Chicago fire, they're going to tell you that they did.
Yep. Especially when they have a lower IQ.
Right. So this is a lower functioning person under an incredible amount of stress.
Yep.
Who's just like, I don't care. Maybe I did, and I just didn't think of it. Maybe I bounced him down. Maybe I slammed him down. Maybe he hit his head. Yep. And again, throwing out these scenarios, which is that's standard protocol for interrogating a potential suspect of a murder.
And here's the other thing that I was thinking when I was doing this research. Every child care provider at some point in time gets frustrated with a child. Okay.
Every parent.
Yes, exactly.
It's not
parents. The law actually holds people who are watching other people's children to a higher standard than the law holds to parents responsible for the well-being of their own children, just so you guys know. And so there could have been a time throughout that day or days leading up where she did get frustrated with Ben. The question here is, did she get so frustrated that she threw him to the ground with such force that it caused his death, which would be significant? Or was she just admitting to the fact that some inappropriate discipline, right? Like, I set him down too hard. Yeah. We see that every day in our line of work. We give people citations. People get fired every single day from investigations that we do where we see inappropriate discipline. Doesn't rise to the level of causing acute harm to a child, but it's not the right temperament to have to watch children, right?
Right. And Melissa probably wasn't, like you said, she was tested at a slightly lower IQ.
Yep.
Functioning wise. Yep. So she, again, smart enough to work
at
a child care center, but she's probably not smart enough to know I can ask for an attorney.
Absolutely. No, she definitely wasn't.
Probably had a mindset, I didn't do anything wrong, so why do I need an attorney?
Why do I need an attorney? Exactly. They're just trying to figure out what happened to Ben. And that's what I mean by there probably were times when she wasn't completely appropriate with him.
Right.
That could have happened. That doesn't mean she's malicious. That doesn't mean that she caused his death. But she could have gotten frustrated with him.
And if Dr. Choi made a mistake on one thing, who's to say if you get a call from law enforcement and say, we've got this wrapped up, wrap it up.
Yeah.
They can. They probably will.
Yeah.
Unless there's glaring
Right.
forensic medical evidence
Yep.
that there didn't appear to be. And if he's, Dr. Choi is saying this happened in the last 3 hours. Well, if he missed one thing, who's to say he didn't? Maybe it happened 5 or 6 hours ago before he got to the center.
Correct.
And it could have happened at home.
Well, and we know that on at least 2 occasions, another teacher in that room with him saw Ben the day of his death throw himself back as well.
Right. And so repeated head blows to a 17-month-old, which may not seem
even being self-inflicted.
right.
Yes.
That they don't seem dramatic impact at the time.
Yep.
But repeatedly
Yes.
will, cause damage.
Yep. But what's interesting is that why does the coroner's office have these x-rays? Because you guys should know that the x-rays that were submitted for evidence to the defense and that were shown at the trial were extremely dark. They were very, very, very difficult to read. I've seen pictures of them. They are very dark. So this anonymous phone call to Melissa's dad that says, hey, there are clear pictures that were never submitted for trial deep in the archives of the coroner's office. It's possible Dr. Choi didn't even get a chance to review those before the police were like, they had their confession, you guys, 14 hours into this. So, well, less than that actually. And so I'm wondering, I'm not trying to insinuate that Dr. Choi was intentionally hiding images.
But he may not have even looked at those clearer images because he didn't feel the need.
Correct.
So they may have been accessible in somewhere, but they didn't make his final report because he never looked at them.
Correct. But here's the thing, Dr. Thomas, so they find them because Dr. Thomas Rudd is now the coroner. So he goes deep dive in the archives. He finds them. They're clear as day. There's no skull fracture. Okay. So Dr. Rudd says, I've shown this to various pathologists and to radiologists. And they've all called me to say there is no skull fracture in this child at all.
Who said they put their finger in it?
Dr. Montez, who was there with Dr. Choi, and he is the one that did the most damning testimony at trial. Exactly. We get to it. We get to that. I knew you would pick up on that. So in 2015, 4 years after Melissa's conviction, and shortly after those clear x-rays of Ben were found, Dr. Rudd changed the manner of death on Ben's death certificate from homicide to undetermined. By this point, defense attorney Kathleen Zellner had taken on Melissa's case. So Kathleen Zellner says, I don't know of a case in America where someone is serving a 31-year prison sentence for a death that was undetermined.
Right.
Absolutely. So Zellner has built a career on getting the wrongfully convicted out of prison, and she was intent on getting Melissa's conviction overturned. In 2016, Melissa was granted an evidentiary hearing to present what Melissa Zellner argued was new evidence before Judge Daniel Shaines, the same judge who presided over Melissa's trial. The new images were the images that had been given to Paul DeLuca and had been darkened. So the state gave DeLuca, Melissa's trial attorney, a disc containing the dark, unreadable x-rays before the trial. At the evidentiary hearing, Dr. Rudd testified about finding the clear x-rays that he and other defense experts said showed no skull fracture, x-rays that Kathleen Zellner argued would have changed the outcome of Melissa's trial. It was a pivotal point in the state's case to convince the jury that it was a homicide, okay? But at the evidentiary hearing, prosecutors argued that this wasn't new evidence in the case. They said the disc provided to DeLuca had software that could enhance the x-rays and that he simply didn't do enough to brighten them. DeLuca says he couldn't even open the software, let alone change the brightness. So Paul DeLuca says, I call in a secretary, I call in somebody else in the office. No one could get any better images, all right? So essentially the prosecution's like, This isn't on us. He had the software to lighten those images and he never did it. So it's not our fault that he couldn't see them. I don't love this.
No.
Yeah.
So they saw them.
Right.
So that doesn't paint a better picture for them.
It does not. It does not. So Kathleen Zellner, with the help of an imaging expert, argued that it didn't matter what DeLuca did, that the x-rays that he had been given had been modified and were inferior to the ones on the coroner's office computer. She also called a witness whom she believed raised more questions about the prosecution's case. Paul Foreman, the deputy coroner during Ben's autopsies. Mr. Foreman disputed the testimony of one of the most important witnesses at Melissa's trial, Dr. Manny Montez. Remember, Montez was the state's final witness who testified that he felt a fracture in Ben's skull. He said he put his finger through it. But Dr. Foreman, said that he was there when Dr. Montez came into the coroner's office and testified that Montez never physically examined Ben's body and never touched his skull. What?
So now we've just got
what?
Some perjury and collusion and people being told what to do to make it easier for the prosecution.
Yes.
So that they don't have to drag out a case.
Right, because they have her confession,
right,
which is what they keep going, back to. Melissa has served. Go ahead. Were you? I felt like you were going to say something.
I don't know where Lincolnshire is, other than being in Illinois. You said Illinois, right?
Yeah, it's in Illinois.
Okay.
I didn't look up exactly southern, northern. I mean, you're welcome to.
I'm going to have to look that up. Again, this isn't like the '60s.
It's not.
This was 10 years ago.
Yeah. This absolutely. So Melissa had served 16 years of her 31-year prison sentence for the death of Benjamin, and she continues to insist that she is innocent. And what's interesting, 48 Hours has actually been covering this case for more than a decade, and over the years, Melissa's appeals have failed. But she and her attorney, still Kathleen Zellner, are not backing down. Now they're taking their fight out of the court system and straight to the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, and his prisoner review board. Kathleen Zellner said, "We're asking them to declare that she's actually innocent and release her. We're also saying commune her sentence." But prosecutors stood by their trial witnesses, Drs. Montez and Dr. Choi, who said they saw and felt a fracture. When the evidentiary hearing ended, Judge Shaines ruled against Melissa. In his ruling, Judge Shaines stated that he didn't find Dr. Foreman's testimony regarding Dr. Montez credible, and he agreed with the state that Mr. DeLuca could have brightened the x-rays and made them readable. It was another letdown for Melissa and her family. Now, Zellner appeals the ruling and again is turned down. Then 4 years later, in 2022, there was a development that few saw coming. Eric Reinhart, a new state's attorney in Lake County, the county where Melissa was convicted, had taken office. Zellner says that he wanted more information on the discrepancy over the x-rays, so he recommended that she retain the digital forensic company Garrett Discovery. So they did pay for them, but this was recommended by the state's attorney, Eric Reinhart. Andrew Garrett is the CEO of Garrett Discovery. Brian Bowman is a digital forensic expert who works for him, for Andrew Garrett. They concluded that the x-rays were manipulated by someone using a software tool used to view x-rays. So how did Paul DeLuca, the defense attorney, end up with these very dark pictures? And so this x-ray, Andrew Garrett, the x-ray, the expert, the computer software expert, he actually can demonstrate for Kathleen Zellner exactly how it happens. So he said, if you take these sliders here and you drag them all the way down or all the way up, you can manipulate the photo. So someone went in and they altered the contrast to make it look like, it was dark, and then they saved it and exported that file on the coroner's computer. So that means that DeLuca, the defense attorney, could not have changed the contrast, because before it was sent to him, it wasn't an original. Before it was sent to him, it was, the contrast was put way, way down. So it was very, very dark. And then it was exported. So there was no manipulation. It's like putting it into a PDF.
So girls, when you take a picture and put a filter on it and then save that picture and then send it to a guy, it's like that.
Yes, it is. It is. Where you make the lighting look just exactly how you want it to look.
It's a lie.
So the defense counsel could have adjusted some of the contrast on the JPEGs that they were given, but they couldn't make the images bigger, and they wouldn't have been able to zoom into the depth and the clarity of the image that the original is able to do. So if Ben Kingan's x-rays were manipulated, who did it? And in their report, Garrett and Bowman pointed to the state. They think that the state adjusted the settings of the images that resulted in blacked, washed out images. And so their theory is that either the prosecutor's office or the coroner's office, somebody representing the state, did this. And this isn't at a kiosk computer in a lobby. This is on a computer in images that are in their custody and in control. They're in the coroner's office, you guys. You have to have access to the coroner's office to do this. So in late 2022, when Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhart met with the forensic experts that he had actually recommended himself, and learned of their findings, attorneys Kathleen Zellner and Paul DeLuca were also there. So Eric, of course, is very indignant. He was saying whoever has done this manipulation should be held accountable. And after the meeting, he believed in Melissa's innocence. He was going to try to rectify this. He is now the new state's attorney, right? So he was feeling somebody innocent is in jail. And so, of course, defense attorneys Paul DeLuca and Kathleen Zellner think that Eric is going to do something about this. But then nothing happens. And as the months stretch on, Zellner decided that she needed to look more closely at Melissa's confession, because that's the only evidence that's used against her. There's nothing that tips this as being a homicide. Absolutely nothing. Kathleen, I keep wanting to call her Melissa. I'm sorry. It's Kathleen Zellner asked Dr. Saln Kassan, a psychology professor and leading expert on false confessions, to review the case. Dr. Kassan had first analyzed the interrogation back in 2016, and this 48 hours was actually a part of it then, and Dr. Kassan talked to a CBS News consultant at that point in time, and said that it really did appear by watching that confession that the police were determined to get a confession. So that's exactly what they got, right? The detectives who interrogated Melissa were not a part of any sort of, they're not cooperating with any further, things. And they don't have to. I want to point that out. Their part in this is done. Of course, Dr. Kassan raises concerns about how long Melissa was in that room, approximately 10 hours, and how particularly vulnerable she was. About 2.5 years before Ben's death, Melissa had been raped. And when you look at these tapes, she's in a small room. She is in a corner, and there are 2 detective men sitting in chairs directly in front of her. Okay, she is, I saw the tapes. She is 100% sitting backed into a corner. Okay, so that's not helping. She was evaluated by a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder from that rape. And she, of course, that's when we discover her borderline intellectual functioning. She scored at a 4.8 grade level in sentence comprehension, 4th grade. Okay, nearly 5th grade, but not quite, in sentence comprehension, which could explain why she believed that she could go home even if she had just confessed to murder. So she was in the interrogation saying things like, "I'm just curious how much more," because, and then Detective George Flanko interrupted her and said, "Not much longer. We're on the phone right now. We're trying to get this done as quickly as possible." Melissa finishes her sentence to say, "Because I just want to go home and spend time with my parents and my puppy." Right? Now, the jury at Melissa's trial did hear about her low IQ, but the judge would not allow a false confession expert to testify. So that's not helping. And, Zellner, the new attorney, believes that testimony might have changed the verdict. But if Melissa didn't harm Ben, then what happened to him? And it raises more questions about that, earlier injury, the one that was discovered at the childcare months before his death, the one that several employees there remembered. And also they documented and called mom, and she took him to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician's like, yeah, just watch him for signs of concussion. He's okay. There was a person named Brenda that worked at the childcare that 3 months before. Now, Nancy Gallagher, remember, she was the other teacher that was present with Ben the day that he died, caring for him. Nancy told investigators that 3 months prior, she said, what I believe, I only heard, I didn't see anything, is that Brenda had put him in the crib, and I believe that he threw himself back. And she actually quit the next day. Brenda quit the next day. Now, Brenda didn't testify at Melissa's trial, and the defense didn't track her down, but she did agree to meet with 48 hours. She wouldn't allow her face to be on camera, and she only wants her first name to be used, of course. She denies that any injury happened to Ben the day before she quit. She maintains that she quit because she was tired of the people that she worked with, which we see every day too. Right. She even denied that Ben threw himself back in the crib, even though everyone says that was a very normal behavior for him. So Brenda has never been charged with harming Ben intentionally or accidentally, but attorney Kathleen Zellner is adamant that Ben sustained a serious injury that day. And she says, I think that his parents were misled by the daycare center about the incident. So other incident reports were looked at during the state licensing investigation. And they did find that there were plenty of incident reports that they were documenting and they were telling the parents about, but they weren't reporting to the state because, just so you know, I'm sure it's very similar in Illinois, but in Michigan, our licensees are required to send an incident report to their licensing consultant, to the state, essentially, to let them know a child sustained an injury, whether it was accidental or not, whatever, but they had an injury that required them to go seek medical attention, okay? They are required by law to report that to us. We open up an investigation just to make sure that there's not any concerns with supervision, with an intentional harming of a child, anything like that. It turns out this center, although documenting their incident reports and telling the parents, they weren't making those reports to licensing, thus making it look like they're trying to cover things up. So between, of course, what we have here with Melissa's confession and the result of Ben's death, finding other violations, which I will just tell you, him crawling into his bouncy seat and being allowed to sleep in his bouncy seat, which they admitted was regular, that's a safe sleep violation. Children can only be placed on their backs in cribs or on their cot with no blankets, not in a bouncy seat, not in a swing, anything like that. So that in itself would be another, violation. But regardless, because of all of these, the childcare was shut down by the state and shortly after Ben passed away. So they are not, don't know if they, reopened under a different name with a different owner, whatever, but they were shut down. So in April 2024, just last year, more than 12 years after Melissa's conviction, with no success in the court system, Kathleen Zellner filed a clemency petition asking Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker to exonerate Melissa or release her for time served. She believes that this is her best chance for freedom at this point in time. Before a scheduled hearing, Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhart spoke to an attorney representing Ben Kingan's family, and he wrote a letter to the Prisoner Review Board stating that his office strongly opposes Melissa's clemency petition. He stated that there's no new evidence in the case and that Melissa's petition for clemency does not establish innocence. Remember, this Eric was the one that recommended the digital company to Melissa's defense, was there when the digital company is like, yeah, these images that were given to Melissa's defense attorneys were tampered with and they couldn't have been adjusted. And he seemed to leave that meeting like, we're going to do something about this. Well, he has since, of course, met with Ben's family, who doesn't want Melissa out. They firmly believe that this woman murdered their child. They don't want her released. So now he's flipped and he's on the family side, which he's with the state, he's representing the state. So this, of course, takes Kathleen Zellner and Melissa's defense attorneys by surprise that Eric has flipped like this.
Well, here's gonna be an unpopular opinion.
Mm-hmm, I'm ready for it.
Even if Melissa's guilty, I don't think she should be locked up right now because their process was jacked up. Mm-hmm. So even if she's guilty,
she didn't have a fair trial.
That is not a clear due process fair trial.
Correct.
Like,
yes.
Not even close.
Yes. So July 9th, 2024, Kathleen Zellner went before the Prison Review Board to make her case for Melissa's freedom. And at that time, Amy, Ben's mom, was able to, at the clemency hearing, she was able to speak, and she said, "My name is Amy Kingan, and I'm here with my husband, Andy. We are the parents of Benjamin Kingan, who was murdered when Melissa threw Ben to the ground, fracturing his skull. Because of her actions, Andy and I are adamantly opposed to Melissa's release. We continue to read about how there's no justice for Melissa, but where is the justice for Ben, and for Andy and myself and our surviving children? We hope that you, as the Prison Review Board and the governor, will deny her petition for clemency." After the hearing, it was up to the Prisoner Review Board to make a confidential recommendation to Governor Pritzker as to whether Melissa should be released. And that confidential recommendation was submitted to Governor Pritzker in January 2025. And there is no deadline for the governor to act upon that. So that's where the case rests at this point in time, with all the information that I've given you. And I know, I told you, it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
This is a complicated case. We do have her confession. I can see 100% where Ben's family is like, absolutely not. My child's murderer needs to stay in prison. But also just knowing the law, due process, and our justice system from the inside out the way that we do, I agree with you that at the very least, there should be a new trial.
Right.
There needs to be a closer look.
There was a lot of factors that were not taken into consideration or misconstrued or even potentially covered up.
Yes, some missteps
and
certainly
manipulated by the state and the prosecution. And again, I'm not on the side of conspiracy.
Right.
But it's
Yep.
Walks like a duck, talks like a duck.
And we know how investigations can get rushed. Like, this is a perfect storm. I can see how very perfectly the missteps could have happened. And for that reason is why the right steps need to be taken, and she deserves a more fair trial.
It's been long enough.
It has.
Again,
it's time.
If she's the accused, guilty or not, she gets a fair trial.
Yes.
That was not.
Yes.
That was not a fair process trial.
So
that was clearly rushed, and again, understandably so. There's an infant, now dead.
Yes,
family wants answers.
Of
Law
course.
enforcement wants answers. Prosecutor wants this over with.
Yes, it's tragic and horrible. Right. But our justice system, has to play out fairly.
And again, hearts to our family, justice for Ben.
Yes,
still means finding out what actually happened.
Exactly. Yes.
Like,
I don't. It does.
With all sympathy, I don't feel this is justice for Benjamin.
Right. No, not when there's so many questions posed like this. Now here in 2025, it's now been 13 years.
Right.
So Melissa went in. I mean, she was 22 at the time. She's in her mid 30s now. I agree. I can understand both sides of this so clearly.
And we've seen lack of justice for.
Yes, absolutely.
You and I both have firsthand seen the lack of justice for children,
victims.
And that's how, unfortunately, our system.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what state we're in; it's not perfect.
No, and I think that's what
it has flaws and loopholes and issues, and it's not doesn't always do what you want it to do.
No, and I think what burns my biscuits is the way that there is seemingly justice for Ben here because of Melissa's confession, and I get that. But there's been so many cases that haven't even went to criminal trial that should have, that you and I have covered, where we're like, there is plenty of evidence, and a prosecutor just simply doesn't want to take the time to do it. And so it's like, oh my gosh, there's got to be a balance, right? I do want to tell you what I know so far about, Amy, how Amy and Andy are doing. As time passed, of course, they watched their other 3 children grow into remarkable and accomplished individuals. Though they remain private about their personal lives, it is known that Amy has been an active member in her Illinois community. She enthusiastically volunteers at Fur Keeps Animal Rescue and is driven by her boundless love for animals. She's fostered many over the years. In addition, she has supported various social causes, including those focused on childhood cancer. For Amy and Andy, their children are their greatest joy, and witnessing their growth has been life's most brilliant thing. Benjamin remains a cherished part of their hearts, not just a memory, but a lasting presence in their lives. And I wish them all the peace and happiness that they can find, and truly true justice.
Absolutely.
Really, really do. And so it's just it's a complicated situation. I have dealt with many child deaths that have happened in child cares that have been just as complicated as this. And it seems as though no matter what the problem is that no matter what the end result is, we can't bring those children back.
Right.
And that is what the tragic truth of it all is, and why it just hurts so bad. So my heart breaks for them. And I will provide an update if we get one, because this is sitting with the Illinois governor. They have their confidential recommendation from the clemency hearing. And
Lake County is very close to Chicago, for the record.
Yes.
It's just north of it. It's like the county north of whatever fucking Chicago is.
Right.
I'm not a geography major, fuck off.
Right. Nobody asked you to be a geography major, I promise. I just asked you to be a podcast host.
But it is directly north of, it's like half hour from Chicago.
Okay. Yeah. I thought that it probably would have been really close, considering where like Melissa grew up just outside of Chicago. So I thought probably. Okay. I have a little brain bath for us that actually, so this is from listener Melissa. She says, "Hi, I have a funny brain bath about my life. Some of it's funny, but some of it's crazy at the same time. So years ago, when my daughter was little, thankfully she was at grandma's for the weekend, and I had 2 incidents happen. So I'll send a picture of myself to describe this person and that they told me I looked like. But anyway, backstory. When I was a single mom, I lived in a basement apartment of a house. My first incident was I went out to a bar for a few drinks with a friend on a Saturday night. I was wearing this black leather jacket, and I got stopped with my friend in the cab by the police saying I looked like a person that was missing and kidnapped. And they asked me if I was okay, and I responded with, yes, I'm not being kidnapped, and I'm going out to the bar for a few drinks with a friend. Then my night was all weird that the whole time I'm apparently missing and didn't know it. And the back history about this missing girl, and I didn't know back history about this missing girl or anything on the news. Then, a few weeks later, I was in bed sleeping, and at 2 a.m., my landlord knocked on my basement bedroom door downstairs and said that there were police here to see me in the middle of the night. She said, so I don't wear a lot of clothes to bed, so I scrambled around and ended up having only enough time to put on a tank top and a pair of underwear and onto the door, and I answered the door. And it was the police, and they asked me if I was safe and if I was being kidnapped. And I was like, no, this is where I live. I'm not missing or kidnapped, and this person who they are looking for said that I look just like her. So obviously they asked for my ID, and I'm like, okay. And they see her ID, and they're like, yep, it's not you. Thank you. She's like, I'm freaked out. I can't go to bed. Then the next day I tell a friend who looks this person up for the missing person case. Oh, by the way, it's in Kitchener, Waterloo, Canada. And I don't even look like her. And to describe myself, she said, to describe myself, I'm like Charnell, probably like 5'2" and 95 pounds. I've always been this small. This girl that was missing turns out to be 5'6", 140 pounds. She said, and I don't look like this girl. I never found out if she was found, but it still makes me laugh to this day. I was around 32 years old at the age and apparently was a missing and kidnapped girl and didn't even know it. She forgot to attach the message or the picture. She was going to attach a picture, but I said, "Oh, thank you for sharing. Really glad you aren't missing." She goes, "Definitely, but for all I know," she's like, "For all I know, I am still missing. I don't know." That would be really weird, though. Who kept reporting her as the missing girl when she's
probably
that much...
some old lady who needs glasses.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
She probably saw the missing girl and saw this
like
girl.
a headshot.
And it's probably like, oh my gosh, I think that's her. And clearly not even close.
And not paying attention to...
That's like an old lady telling me I look like Nate Bargatze. We're both white men with a beard. Like, that's where it ends.
Yeah, but I couldn't imagine being woke up at 2 a.m. and the police being like, even the police, they should be paying attention to height and weight, right? Like, even if her face looks like that girl, the height and weight should be a clue.
Like, did you shrink and lose a lot of weight recently?
Right. Did you lose 40 pounds and shrink 4 inches? Probably not.
4 inches is a lot.
Sure. Sure is.
I mean, if you lost 4 inches.
Yes, if you lose 4 inches,
that's a lot.
That is a lot. That would be very sad.
I mean, I think 4 inches is probably standard. Just saying.
Yeah, we'll go with that, Jay. So, anyway, I'm really glad she's not actually missing, but also
I hope
super
they find
weird.
the missing girl.
Well, I know. And she's like, well, it turns out she's from in Canada. Like, the missing girl was from Canada. So it's so bizarre that 2 different instances. Also, I covered this on a Brain Bath once, but there was a missing woman who joined her own search party. That's still one of my favorite
I did
stories.
hear that, and we joke about that because it reminds us of someone we knew.
Yes. Clarice.
Yeah, Clarice.
Our friend Clarice. She would absolutely go missing in the woods hiking and join her own search party. 100%. Yeah. So
I actually think she did join a search party once. She wasn't missing.
She did,
but
yes.
She did join a search party. She's like, "What are we doing?" Looking. It was like in the water at a beach.
Yes.
She's like, "What are we doing? Looking for bodies?" Like, "Can I help?" Sure. So then the next thing she knows, she's in a human chain looking for a body.
Yep, that did happen to her. Yeah, I remember that. I think there was even one in the wilderness because she lives in West Virginia.
Probably.
So there was one in the wilderness too that she joined. But yeah, really glad, Melissa, that you are not missing and hopefully the other person was found. And that is super bizarre. And also a little concerning to me that 2 different police officers couldn't figure out that she didn't match the height and weight so significantly.
Like, as soon as she answered the door, they should have been like, "This ain't it."
Not you, but also, you doing okay?
Right. Like, just while we're here, you good?
Right. Yeah. Like, you're not being kidnapped, right? Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you all so much for listening to us this week. We'll be back next week with more, tales of horror to bring to you. And we hope that you keep it curious.
Keep listening.
Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was weird for you without a third person, wasn't it? You did good.
All right,
you did good.
Did right.
You did.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.